In the summer of 1870, in the flat farmland of Jefferson County, Illinois, a baby girl entered the world. Her name was Martha Caroline Wilson, though everyone who loved her would one day call her Mattie. She was born on a clear, hot, humid Tuesday, July 26th, the daughter of Samuel Mathis, Uncle Sam Wilson, and Rebecca Osborne Wilson. Hot, humid Tuesday, July 26th. The daughter of Samuel Mathis, Uncle Sam Wilson, and Rebecca Osborne Wilson, who was a young couple raising a family on the edge of Mount Vernon. Mattie was born just after the Civil War when Ulysses S. Grant was president. This was during the period of Reconstruction right after the Civil War. Mattie was the second of what would become a bustling household of 8 Wilson children: William, Sarah Jane, John Houston, Louisa, and Rosa Ann, Isaac, and Eldora. Their child was shaped by the rhythms of rural life: chores at dawn, one-room schoolhouses, church gatherings, and the constant hum of farm work. The Wilsons were a close, hard-working family rooted deeply in the fertile soil of southern Illinois. So if you can imagine um, Laura Ingalls Wilder, or the Waltons. This was during that time period. There was no electricity. There was cooking on the wood stove. There was horses and buggies. So this was during that time. For family context, Mattie's daughter Ethel is my paternal great grandmother, and her sister Lita had a daughter named Gwen Grundon Coleman, who provided me with these photographs. Some of these are the old tintype metal kind of photographs, and some are cabinet cards. And the cabinet cards have a thick cardboard feel to them. They're kind of rare, and I'm thrilled to be able to share them with more family members than would have been able to see the originals. But I do have them in person. If anyone wants to see them, just let me know. I haven't heard from Gwen in a while. It's been a couple of years now, but if you're listening, Gwen, thank you so much for these pictures. They bring my heart joy, and I hope they're loved by the rest of our family too. Mattie's daughter Ethel was my grandma, Clarabelle Merritt. The year after Mattie was born, Illinois went through a severe regional drought, stressing the corn and wheat crops. A few years later, in 1874, there was a grasshopper plague that destroyed crops across Marion County and the state. One newspaper article even said that there were clouds of them that kind of blocked out the sunlight. So this was not a small amount of grasshoppers. We're talking the grasshoppers would eat the corn down to just leaving nubs in the field. So if you think about the year of the locust or something like that, this is a a much larger population of these kind of insects. So that was a tough year for crops. In the 1870s was also the beginning of an era, because that's when the Chicago branch of the Illinois Central Railroad expansion made it to Meacham Township, right over there by Farina. In her youth, Mary carried a quiet dignity, the kind captured in the rare portrait that survives from her early adulthood. Her clothing, posture, and expression all speak to a woman grounded in time, yet ready to face the decades ahead. Here's a picture of her in her youth, probably around 18 or 20 years old. She had dark hair neatly parted down the middle with a calico dress with lots of volume in the shoulders. I didn't realize that was such a fashion back then, with the big poofy shoulders. 1883 was marked as the year without a summer, because strange cold snaps kept happening throughout the summertime. It was tied to some volcanic dust from Croatia, Indonesia. And in 1887, a major winter storm, or a series of major winter storms, disrupted the rail lines and farm transport. So think about how much snow you have to get for it to interrupt the rail lines from going through. That's quite a bit of snow. In 1895, there was a harsh winter. It was one of the coldest on records, causing major livestock losses in Marion County. And in April of 1896, a deadly tornado system swept through the entire southern Illinois, and the nearby counties were hit very hard. In 1901, a severe drought hampered the corn yields, and water wells ran low in Meacham Township. In 1901, there was a record rainfall also, so that caused flooding from the already parched roads of the Kaskaskia River, and it affected the spring planting of the crops too. A treasured photograph from this era shows Mattie with her brothers and sisters, the 8 Wilson children, all grown, gathered, and captured in this rare family portrait. It's a reminder that even as she built her own family, she remained deeply connected with the ones she came from. In this photo, from left to right, starting with the back row, you have Rose, Ike, Mattie, and John. In the front row, you have Louisa, Bill, Sarah, and Dora. And all of them have the same mouth and eyes. It's like a family trait in this photograph, so you'll be able to see that. The girls share very similar faces, and the boys were pretty tall for that era. So as Mattie grew into a young woman, she carried with her the quiet strength of her parents. In February of 1891, at just 20 years old, she married a local farmer, David Courson, who was her own age, and shared her upbringing, her values, and her connections to the land. Together, they began building a life in Meacham Township, Marion County, a place that would remain Mattie's home for the rest of her days. Dave and Mattie's early years were marked by both joy and hardship. Their first son, Harry, was born in 1892, but lived only just a short time. And I'm sure that loss was especially heartbreaking because he was their first child and because he was a boy. During the hard labor days of early farm life in Illinois, boys were especially prized for their ability to help dad with the family farm as he grew up. Harry was buried in the Courson Cemetery with a tombstone that resembles a little crib. You'll see a picture here. His loss was one that shaped Mattie's heart, but she pressed forward, raising the children who followed, which was Earl, May, Ethel, Lita, and Arthur. Dave and Mattie had then only been married for 5 years when her mom, Rebecca H. Osborne Wilson, passed away at the age of 49 in August of 1896. Mattie was only 26 years old, had already lost her mom and her firstborn son, and then their son Earl was just a toddler. By 1910, the Coursons were firmly established in Meacham Township. The census that year shows Mattie and Dave surrounded by 5 children, with 1 lost, the detail that echoes the private grief she carried. And like many women of her era, Mattie understated her age on the census, shaving off a few years. Maybe it was vanity, or maybe just the way women of her generation navigated across the expectations of time. David was a farmer. Their son Earl was helping on the farm. He was 16 at the time. One thing, too, is that David and Mattie were pretty young, but they owned their own farm, free and clear of a mortgage. In 1913, heavy rains flooded the low-lying farmland, and the bridges washed out in the area. And at the dawn of World War I, there were harsh winters. Between the fuel shortages and the cold weather, rural families felt the strain, along with missing their youthful male family members who were all fighting in the war. And this was at a time when one-room schoolhouses flourished. So back then in that area, it was Rockhold, Lacey School, Prairie Grove, Switzer School, Rooker Schools. And her dad, Samuel, died on October 5th, 1913 in Rome, Jefferson County that year. By the end of 1918, the Spanish flu epidemic was ravaging the world and Marion County, Illinois. Schools were closed, public events were canceled, and the newspaper reported the local families that were affected. In January of 1919, their son Earl, their oldest surviving son, departed for France. This is right after World War I on a ship named Adriatic. The armistice was signed in November of the previous year, so Earl was there to offer post-war occupation and stabilization of the forces to war-ravaged France. 1920 census shows Dave and Mattie, they're age 49, with Lita, who's 18, and Arthur, the youngest, who's at age 11. Mattie would have been cooking on a wood stove, tending the gardens, washing clothes by hands, and keeping the Courson farm running, even though there were challenges after the war there, the First World War. The next summer had a huge heat wave, which burned the corns in the field and caused a low yield on the hay. 1927 brought the Great Mississippi Flood, which disrupted the markets and grain prices. And this was during the Roaring Twenties, as they called it, the flapper decade. Automobiles started becoming more and more common, and locally, one-room schools began merging into a larger school system. By 1930, the Courson household had changed. Only one of the children remained at home, the youngest, Arthur. And for the first time, Mattie reported her age accurately on the census at 59. The Great Depression was beginning to reshape farmers' lives, but the Coursons endured, as they always had, through hard work and family unity. During this time, they also took in a couple of boarders, a public school teacher named Susie Hopkins and her 5-year-old daughter, Silly. I do not know if the family was related to the Hopkins boarders, but I've found no family connection so far. If anyone knows any more details about these two, I'd love to hear who they were and more details about how they met the Courson family and where Mrs. Hopkins taught school. In 1930s, we had a tough decade in the family. This was during the Dust Bowl era. 1930 to 31 had a drought, which caused major crop failures and dried wells and livestock feed shortages. In 1934, the dust storm reached southern Illinois, and it covered everything with a layer of dirt to match the already dismal financial outlook of the farming families of south central Illinois. The summer of 1936 was one of the hottest summers in the United States. It scorched crops again. A photograph from the late 1930s or early 1940s shows Mattie and David seated outside their home, their granddaughter, Helen France, standing between them. It's a tender moment. The aging grandparents, the next generation at the side, the Courson home standing solid behind them. This is the Mattie who had raised a family, weathered storms, and become the matriarch of a growing clan. In this next photo, you'll see a 3-generation photograph of Mattie, her daughter May, and her granddaughter Helen. This photo was taken sometime between 1938 and 1943. And it was probably summertime based on their short sleeve dresses. The winter of 1940 was harsh. It was heavy snow and sub-zero temperatures in the area. And then in the summer of 1942, during the strains of World War II, Mattie's second son, Earl Courson, died suddenly of a heart attack. He was still quite a young man, and his passing left a wound that time could not fully heal. So now she's lost both of her oldest 2 boys. So that had to be extremely hard on her. Just 1 year later, in 1943, after more than 50 years of marriage, Mattie lost her husband, Dave. She was 73, and now she faced the world without the partner who had shared every season of her adult life. His death marked the end of an era, but not the end of her story. She remained surrounded by her children and grandchildren. 1945 had a wet spring, which delayed planting across Marion County. And 1948 brought tornado activity to the region. Here's a photograph of Mattie standing beside her daughter, May. May Elizabeth Courson France is her full name. And that captures the bond between mother and daughter. This relationship would become central in Mattie's final years as she lived the remainder of her life with May and her husband. This image shows three generations together: Mattie, May, and young Helen Marie France, who would later become Helen Howell. It's the living portrait of the Courson France Howell maternal line, a legacy of strength, resilience, and continuity. This picture shows Mattie in her later years. Glass again, cardigan, hair neatly combed, the face of a woman who had lived through Civil War Reconstruction, the Gilded Age, 2 World Wars, the Great Depression, and the dawn of modern America, with electricity starting to come into homes and automobiles being on the road now. In 1950, the final census of Mattie's life recorded her age at 79. On October 29th, 1950, on a Sunday, Mattie passed away at the home of her daughter, Miss Clyde France, in Salem, Illinois. The news was carried in the Kinmundy Express, where the Meacham community expressed sadness at the loss of a woman who had been part of their lives for decades. Mattie was laid to rest beside her husband David in Elder Cemetery in Kinmundy, Illinois. Their shared gravestone bears the simple inscriptions of their names and years, a quiet testament to a long life lived together. Mattie's story is not one of fame or fortune. It's the story of a woman who lived fully in the world she was given, who raised children, worked the land, endured loss, and built a family whose branches continue to grow today. Through photographs, census records, newspaper clippings, and the memories preserved by her descendants, Mattie's life becomes more than just names and dates. It becomes the portrait of resilience, devotion, and the enduring strength of family. This is the life of Martha Caroline Mattie Wilson Courson, daughter, sister, wife, mother, grandmother, and matriarch. This is a life rooted in the soil of Southern Illinois and carried forward into our generations like mine and yours. I'm Melissa Hasselbrock McDonald, and Mattie was my great-great-grandmother. Thank you for listening to her story. If you'd like to hear more stories like these, please subscribe to this channel by clicking the bell. If you have any information about her life or her children's lives that you'd like to share with me, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks. We'll see you next time.